Well, good evening. As the results come trickling in, just over 10.7 million ballots cast, the capturing process is nearing the 70% mark. As the economic freedom fighters just over the 1 million mark. I've got the Deputy President of the Red Berets with me, Floyd Shivambu. Thank you for your time, Mr. Shivambu. You're just over the million mark. The polls put you growing at anywhere between 10 and 14%. You're currently just under 10%. Are you happy with your performance at the moment?
Yes, we are happy as the EFF with the performance thus far, because if you were to check at this stage in 2014, we're far below 500,000 votes when 70% of the voting stations had been counted. So now we're inspired that at 70% of the voting stations, the EFF is doing relatively well. And we are the only party that is significantly growing in terms of the number of actual voters. So the ANC is struggling to even reach the 10 million. So they will never actually reach the 10 million at the end of this electoral process. The DA is struggling to reach the 4 million which they had in 2014. But the EFF already was sitting comfortably in the million votes which we had in 2014. And the direction is only upward now. There's no other direction except going up in terms of the growth of the EFF. This shows the confidence that the people of South Africa have on the EFF. And you must remember that we're running a campaign against an establishment which was determined to crush the EFF, to deal with its legitimacy. We're running against a president who was embraced by the capitalist establishment. All forms of media, domestically and globally, we're saying Cyril Ramaphosa is the savior who must be voted by all South Africans. But the numbers are struggling now. They're not going to get more than 60% of the vote. That is a fact. And you must take note that the voting stations that are still coming are going to be the metros. And voters in the metropolitan spaces and areas are not very friendly with the ruling party, with the ANC. So we are quite confident that even that 56% of the ANC is under threat as it stands now. So, and that is what we had intended to do in any way, that if we do not get them under 50%, at least they must be under 60%. And it's one of the biggest achievements that we are going to get out of these elections as the economic freedom fighters.
Undoubtedly, the state capture inquiry has dented, and the investigations into that has dented the image of the ANC, and it's seen in the figures here today. They are getting far less than they did in the previous elections. Scandals of the EFF, VBS, most notably. Has that dented the image of the party?
Look, do you know, the people of South Africa and voters are not fools, are not stupid. So even when the white racist media tried to dent the image of the EFF with false allegations of VBS and all sorts of things there, the people are still voting for us. We're going to gain not less than 70% growth as compared to the previous elections. And this happens against all sorts of untested allegations that were thrown our way. Because the people know that these are the true people who are representing us. The EFF is the only voice of the voiceless, of the poor, of the landless, masses of our people, of the jobless people here in South Africa. So the people were never fooled by the racist establishment which tried to delegitimize the EFF in the face of the entire electorate. So it's one of the things that really we were not concerned about. That is why we did not waste time trying to over-explain ourselves and over-clarify these things. We instead went to the ground and speak to the people directly. And the people responded. They are giving us the necessary mandate. We're going to have an increased number of members of parliament. We're going to be official opposition in Mpumalanga, and additional to the Northwest and Limpopo in terms of what happens. So the EFF is the only growing organization, and we are very inspired and happy of that particular fact.
Speaking of the youth vote in South Africa, 80% of first-time voters, 18 and 19-year-old, didn't even register. The EFF, I understand, is a party that prides itself on mobilizing the youth. Have you done that, and have you done that sufficiently if the figures of registrations just don't show it?
There was a significant number of, the numbers that are giving me are not correct, by the way. There's a significant number of young people who registered. and went to vote in these previous elections. So if you were to check in the areas and universities and universities of technology, there's a significant number of young people who went to vote, and a significant number of those voted for the EFF. In terms of what happens, there is no democracy nowhere in the world where you'll have 100% turnout. And every time, everywhere, historically, since the beginning of these things of elections, there's never been 100% turnout of first-time voters. The trends that define South Africa in terms of the so-called youth apathy is a global phenomenon. It's a reality that defines elections and the integration into adulthood. A lot of young people are still trying to figure out what is happening, what are the issues, who do I choose as a political party, which home do I call my political home. So there is nothing untoward that is happening in South Africa. And of course, we should do a lot of work as political parties in terms of building a consciousness to say that as soon as you turn 18, you must take responsibility, you must vote for a political party which you think resonates with your interest. And that is what we should, all of us, do. But what is happening in South Africa is not a crisis level. Actually, to have more than 70% of voters turning out to vote is a huge achievement. It's not something that we must decry about. It's far much better than the so-called established democracies in the whole of the world.
I want to speak about Gauteng for a second. It was one of the provinces where a DA, EFF, if they decided to join hands into a coalition with some of the other smaller parties, potentially could have taken the province. At the moment, the ANC is hanging on with just over 50%. Were there ever plans for a coalition government, and are you resigning yourselves to the fact that Gauteng is not going to happen?
Look, one thing which we can say categorically clear now is that there will not be an outright winner in Gauteng. So those Twitter fools and all sorts of semi-literate people who are celebrating the victory of the ANC in Gauteng, they did that prematurely. There's not going to be an outright winner in Gauteng. Okay. It's only 50% of the vote that has been counted in Gauteng. And the ones that are coming now, it's metros. In terms of our own internal process, the EFF has doubled its 2014 and 2016 votes in terms of the turnout in Gauteng. So I can tell you now that when the results come into the board there to complete Soweto, to complete the metros, the ANC will not be an outright winner in Gauteng. And we are going to determine and discuss the issue of coalitions only after all election results have been tallied. We are not going to entertain now what happens, but you know that the principal issues that we have been saying is that whoever wants to be coalition with the EFF must implement the policies of the EFF. Whoever wants to be government because of the vote of the EFF must be willing to implement the policies of the EFF. It has been happening in Johannesburg. There's 24-hour clinics in Johannesburg because of the EFF. There's mobile clinics in informal settlements because of the EFF. Security guards and cleaners and general workers are being insourced in Johannesburg and Tshwane and Nelson Mandela Bay because of the economic freedom fighters. So whoever wants to be government, which is going to be voted by the EFF, must be willing to expropriate land without compensation, must be willing to move towards the nationalization of banks, mines and other strategic sectors of the economy, must be willing to pursue massive protected industrialization, must be willing to fight against corruption, not just by talking about it, practical fight against corruption and uprooting of all these corrupt practices, must be willing to build state capacity with the ultimate aim of abolishing tenders, because those are the policy positions of the EFF that we stand by. So whoever is going to talk to us must have to comply with the policy positions of the EFF, the 7 cardinal pillars for economic freedom in our lifetime.
Okay. Lastly, there are about 30 parties that have signed an objection that's been handed to legal services from the IEC, double voting, the issues with the indelible ink. The EFF's name is not on that list. What is your position with regard to the objections that have been raised with the IEC, and what do you make of those 30 parties, 30 out of 48, saying that this election was not free or fair?
Look, they are playful. Those small parties are extremely playful. You must ask them how many party agents did they have where, how many volunteers did they have where did they campaign. You cannot not campaign and then when the results are not showing, you want to object to a process. They are being opportunistic. Like if they were genuine about objecting to the process, they should have objected as elections were happening that there's a problem there and there. Ask all of them, the 30 of them, where is the material circumstances that have caused the elections to be not free or fair? They won't tell you. It's pure opportunism, and even the registration of majority of those political parties was pure opportunism. And what drove that opportunism? They saw the victory and the success of the EFF in 2014, and they did not know that the EFF success in 2014 came with hard work. It came with a clear ideological posture and a clear politics of what we stand for. Not some shika arrangement which was being done by Claudi and Jimmy Manye and all of those things there. And then when the results are not coming back, they think that they must come and disrupt the process of consolidating results here. They must stop irritating people. They must accept the results. If there is material basis, the IEC is going to handle that. We have dealt with those issues in the PLO here, and we have said that, of course, if there are concerns of double voting, they must be dealt with. In a way, that is a criminal offense. Those that voted twice must be arrested. They must be jailed so that we can send a clear warning to all the people who want to fraud the electoral process that we cannot do so. It's not allowed in terms of South African laws. But those small parties are playful. We must not entertain them. They didn't win elections and they must accept that.
EFF Deputy President Floyd Shivambu, thank you very much for your time.